Welcome to this video on the law of Danda. It's one of the many spiritual laws described in the book, The Spiritual Laws of Life, by Harold Clint, the spiritual leader of Eckankar. This video is not sponsored by Eckankar, but there are links below for more information. Let's have a look at the definition in the book. Danda, self-discipline, sometimes called the righteous law. It treats the divine rights of the people as well as that of kings. Works both ways. Neither can trespass upon the other's rights. What are the divine rights of the people spoken of here? Maybury's two laws provide a guide for our natural rights and freedoms. Richard Maybury found that all the great religions agreed on two basic principles of conduct. They are, do all you have agreed to do, and do not encroach on other persons or their property. As an example of how this guide is applied to rights, consider the area of volunteer work. We have the right to volunteer our help. We have the freedom to help any way we like, but we have no right to help those who don't want it. Consider travel. We have the natural right to travel and the freedom to travel anywhere we choose as a general principle, but we don't have the right to invade or go where we're not welcome. How about our speech? We have the natural right to express our thoughts and feelings, and the freedom to express them in our own way, but we don't have the right to destroy someone else's life with lies against them. The reason they are called divine rights is because they are our birthright as soul, as divine sparks of God. What are the divine rights of kings? They are greatly misunderstood. Kings in the past have assumed it to mean that they are divinely appointed by God by virtue of royal birth, therefore entitled to whatever they please, like a spoiled brat. This, of course, is just foolish. The divine rights of a king are really more like the rights of a parent teaching a child to become a responsible adult, the complete opposite role. To illustrate, let's have a look at the biblical record of the Israelites. They were remarkable in the fact that for the longest time after their escape from slavery in Egypt, they never had kings. In their place they had military leaders, judges, and prophets. A military leader such as Joshua or Gideon would organize the people when enemy tribes caused trouble. Every able-bodied man was already armed and trained by tradition. When the trouble was over, they'd go back to their ordinary lives. Judges settled grievances between neighbors according to the laws developed by Moses. Ever since Moses, the people were blessed with a long line of great prophets they consulted for wisdom, healing, and blessings. The bitter memory of slavery and the 40 years in the Sinai desert taught them to take both freedom and self-reliance very seriously. The prophets reminded them of their sacred covenant with God to follow divine law. After all, it was only through their faith in God and obedience to divine law and the resulting divine interventions, one stunning miracle after another, that their liberation was made possible. In other words, they'd earned it. The covenant was in place to keep it alive in their hearts and in practice. A king brings about the encumbrances of administrators, police, standing armies, prisons, and taxes. The Israelites had none of that. Their system of self-government worked so well that it lasted for nearly 400 years, much longer than most republics, kingdoms, or empires have ever lasted. Much later, the Vikings were also known to practice a similar kingless, self-governing system, as did the early Americans of the frontier. The only reason Israelite self-government came to an end was because the people developed a growing fear of their many powerful enemies and began to demand a king, a strong personality to take care of them. Till then, the prophet was generally respected as the final authority in the land because he carried the mantle of the power of God. He was the spiritual guardian, tasked with keeping the people morally strong and free. As long as the people listened to the prophet, kept their faith in God, and took care of themselves, they were fine. But when their demands for a king became unrelenting, it was with great sadness that the great prophet Samuel finally gave them one. This broke the first commandment, Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Political kingship is personality worship. Blind faith in Chairman Mao is a prime recent example. It's a replacement of trust in the divine power with trust in the most fallible thing in the world, an unethical human being. Herein lies the crux of the story of the divine rights of kings. You see, the prophet was the real king. As a spiritual leader, his was not a political role, but the polar opposite, because it eliminates the need for a political king. Politics is all about fear. Fear creates political turmoil. Unethical troublemakers, once in power, will frighten people with lies and propaganda so that they'll give them even more power. Fearful people demand a powerful king to give them security. It's a vicious spiral of increasing entrapment. To counter fear, the prophets always taught a strong faith in God, in addition to strong self-reliance. It's a benevolent spiral of increasing freedom. When self-reliance and faith in God grow strong, fear goes away, and the people need no political king. A political king only has the power of force to hurt, destroy, and kill. To quote Chairman Mao, power comes from the barrel of a gun. But a spiritual king is harmless. His power comes from divine love. It builds, heals, strengthens, encourages, educates, and enlightens. Unfortunately, the people trespassed on Samuel's divine rights as a spiritual king by scorning and dishonoring their sacred covenant with God. As a consequence, the divine rights of the people were lost. Before he died, Samuel gave Saul, the first king, his blessing, but his brief and troubled reign ended in disaster. David, slayer of Goliath, became the next king and forged a powerful army. He subjugated the surrounding enemy tribes and nations into an empire. He was just the kind of mighty king the people wanted, a hero they worshipped. King Solomon, his son, ruled the empire wisely and made it very wealthy. At his death, however, his sons lost no time destroying the empire. It split up into two weak, squabbling nations, Israel and Judah. In the two lines of kings that followed, a good king was a rare exception. The people regretted their petty little tyrants. How bitter was their sorrow when the Babylonians conquered Israel and took the entire population into slavery. Slavery! Their whole culture was based on liberation. Only a remnant eventually returned. The rest were resettled by the Persians in what are today Afghanistan and Kashmir. The kingdom of Judah, on the other hand, survived the Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Roman conquerors. It was the Arabs who finally drove them from their homeland, and they became known around the world as Jews, the people of Judah. Only recently have we all witnessed the historic nation of Israel, against all odds, arise from the dead. In Book 2, page 77 of the Shariat Ki Sudmad, the Holy Book of Eckankar, the law of Danda is described this way. The righteous law is called Danda. It treats the divine rights of the people as well as that of kings. When it works both ways, it means that neither can trespass upon the other's rights. To have to write law upon the books and use this as a guide to keep society within the moral standards of life is to bring about disorder in a society. As the human race enters upon its decline in civilized standards, there is and was a transfer of the center of government from within man to enacted statutes. In other words, from moral standards deeply embedded in the inner consciousness of people to laws written in books. When the time came that the fundamental Danda, the law of righteousness, was no longer in the hearts of people but in books, then the decline of civilization set in for society. Why is it that written law brings about disorder in society? Consider the sheer quantity of written law today. Richard Maybury has pointed out that in the U.S. alone, there are some 20,000 laws, written on some 300,000 pages. He estimates that every American commits at least 3 felonies a day without even knowing it. This is a comical thought, but it's also appalling. These laws keep a vast army of politicians, administrators, police, tax accountants, lawyers, and prison staff working around the clock. With more laws being manufactured all the time, outlawing just about everything we can imagine, such a burden increasingly crushes the spirit of society to the point of death. Imagine if all 20,000 laws were repealed, and if we all instead memorized and observed Maybury's 2 laws until they were written in our hearts. Do all you have agreed to do, and do not encroach on other persons or their property. How different things would be. No one would be ignorant of the law. Keeping things very simple is not a sign of a primitive culture. It's a sign of an advanced civilization, something, as the Sharia points out, we haven't seen in a long time. Let's read one more paragraph from the Sharia. It is only the ekmasters who have witnessed such changes and have tried to lift the human race above the decline of every civilization in the history of mankind. The task is hard, but since the Golden Age, long since past, every ekmaster who has spent time upon this earth has gone through the Silver Age, the Copper Age, and others to witness the degenerative changes. Slowly has come the Iron Age, which marks the lowest ebb in individual and social degeneration. It is during this period that modern laws, governments, and social regulations began to appear. Men, supposedly wise in nature, hailed these changes as progress. But it's not true that man has progressed in nature, but has decreased due to the workings of the Kel forces. He usually does not recognize such a negative force, and if he does at all, he scorns it as being nothing in his life. The Kel force is a negative force in human nature, also known as Satan. The Ek is the Holy Spirit, the divine power, which is the polar opposite force. Ek masters are people who have become so rooted in the divine power that they have become spiritual kings. They rule over their human nature with complete control. They refuse to allow the negative forces of lust, anger, greed, attachment, or vanity get the best of them. They are masters of every situation. Only those who govern themselves in this way are qualified to be kings. This golden standard automatically rules out most of the political kings or leaders we see today. However, they rule us because, in our ignorance of the law of Danda, as a society, we've demanded them. No other reason. And like the Israelites of old, no matter how we regret them, we deserve the kings we've chosen. Ever since the Magna Carta was introduced back in 1215, politicians around the world have written and amended many charters of rights and freedoms for their respective nations. Some of them try to replace true rights with impossible, unsustainable, or downright silly perks, such as the right to health, the right to a free income, or even the right to an afternoon nap. It's nice to have a bill of true rights and freedoms enshrined in a constitution, but as we have seen in the last couple of years, they can be violated with impunity by our political kings when we panic instead of trusting in the divine power. If our divine rights are not written in our hearts, how can they be observed, let alone guaranteed? We tend to sell them to the political king offering the highest bid of security. Only by following the law of Danda will they once again be rewritten in our hearts. What exactly are the divine rights of kings? They are known in Ekankar as the 7 paths to God. They are not just rights, but great spiritual powers, privileges, and responsibilities. They are the right to teach the way home to God, the right to share the love of God, the right to be a pure channel for the divine power, the right to express the wisdom of God in creative ways, the right to do the kind of good works one loves doing, the right to open the door to spiritual liberation for those who've earned it, and the right to spread the news of spiritual liberation wherever one travels. These are majestic rights. All true and natural human rights are based on them. They keep these spiritual kings happily occupied in all manner of secret and unseen ways. They seek no attention to themselves, but only to advancing the kingdom of God. You can make the law of Danda your friend. It's the law of righteousness. Righteousness is self-discipline. Self-discipline is self-government. Self-government ensures self-reliance. Self-reliance gives us a controllable life. The flip side of self-reliance is rightful freedom. Freedom gives us an enjoyable life. How do we take the first step on this royal road to happiness? How do we come into contact with the divine power and renew our ancient covenant? How do we restore the rule of the spiritual king in our lives? I'm glad you asked. I'd like to show you the simplest, easiest, and most effective way. It's the hue, the most ancient prayer and love song to God. You sing it with a deep breath like this. Sing it with love. Sing it every day for up to 20 minutes. Keep it in your heart and mind all day. Watch for your dreams and record them. Watch for miracles in your life, the evidence of the divine power. Make it a disciplined habit. It can put you in contact with a spiritual king, a teacher, someone you can deeply love and respect. As the inner master, he may appear as the master of your own faith. Restore him as your king, your captain, your teacher, your role model for living a life wonderful, far beyond your wildest dreams. That's what it's done for me. It can do it for you too. Thank you for watching.